joining today. I feel that every time I do one of these office hours, the circumstances in our world tends to keep changing. So I hope everyone's family, you and your family, are safe and doing well. I wanted to talk to you. Hopefully today we have a combination of people joining us. We have parents who are interested in how to help their young adult in their life hopefully launch into their new job, into a new role. We have students and grads who are always thinking about, how do I get that internship? How do I get myself into that next position? And then we also have people who are just part of the community and want to learn more about what we're all doing. So welcome. So happy to have you here. For those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to meet or speak with before, my name is Beth Hendler Grunt, and I am the founder of Next Great Step. And our sole focus is to provide guidance to college students and recent grads on helping them land the job that they deserve. In essence, we help bridge the gap from college to the real world. And the focus of today's office hours, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the hiring trends, who's hiring, where are the jobs, especially for young adults. I think that question comes up quite a bit. I also want to just touch on virtual interviewing because that is the de facto standard of how interviews are happening now, and want to make sure that people understand how to best prepare, how to get ready for those. And then we'll just talk a little bit about, if you know a student or grad who feels stuck, what are some things they can do just to get themselves going? And again, while I'm talking, feel free to post your questions in the chat and we can, address them as we move along. So let's talk about it. Who's hiring and what's happening? So I've done I kind of do a lot of research staying up to date as to what's happening. It's obviously the market is very fluid, but a couple of things that we're seeing. So right now there was a recent survey done that over 63% of recruiters are confident that hiring is going to continue. It's going to increase as we move into the end of the year and into early 2021, which I think is positive. Even about a few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal quoted that the job openings are actually at the same level right now as they were pre-pandemic. Now, with an asterisk saying that a lot of those openings have shifted, from one industry to another. So openings that might have been in a different field have kind of those fields that are in more demand, and I'll share those in a moment. But the message is that there are opportunities. There are opportunities out there. We work with dozens. We've worked with hundreds of recent grads, but especially this year, and we do have recent grads that are getting hired. It is more competitive, absolutely. Things are taking a little bit longer, but there is absolutely opportunity out there. So I want you to kind of sometimes cut through the clutter of the noise and the news. I know it's very hard and it's very sometimes can be very discouraging, but there absolutely are opportunities in the areas that they see. In terms of who's hiring and the industry's hiring. So they see opportunities, the accounting and financial roles, whether it's as an auditor or payroll. Technology has continued to be a big opportunity in the cloud space, business analytics, data analytics, coding. There's huge demand. I had the opportunity to speak to the head of a pretty large online learning platform, and in their mind, some of the big names that we're familiar with, like Google and Facebook, they can't get enough of people who have the right skill set for coding and data analytics. So that's incredibly in high demand right now. The other areas in terms of in the creative area, in terms of digital marketing, content creation, website creation. There's a lot of, I think, entrepreneurs or people that are building their businesses and using digital media as a way to do that. We also are seeing things in the healthcare, obviously in pharma and all these breakthroughs, but there's a huge demand for everyday over-the-counter medications as well as creating new ones and all of the type of roles inside of an organization. You don't have to be an engineer just to go work at a pharmaceutical company. They need people in marketing and HR and all those areas. Obviously, logistics, transportation, construction, real estate, and finance. Now, finance is interesting. Finance was hiring really heavily throughout most of this majority of the year. And just in the last week or two, companies like JP Morgan and Wells Fargo said that they're going to start to pull back and they might need to kind of retract a little bit on what they've already built out. So I think it depends on what area you're going into. So I think, finance was, I'd say, strong about a month or two ago. You have to watch that carefully in terms of the area that you're going to move into. And then the biggest companies hiring right now are someone somewhat obvious in terms of Target, Amazon, UPS, FedEx. But again, these are not all on the front line of delivering a package. It's roles throughout the organization. So I think just to always be aware of that there's these opportunities in these companies that are growing and meeting an incredibly high demand, that there's opportunity there. All right. So let me talk a little bit about the video interviews and what we're seeing with that. So that's the new way. That's the new de facto way of how companies are interviewing and really assessing candidates. And what we've done, and I put that in the chat, is that we've really taken a look at this to make sure that our clients are ready for video interviewing, because as much as you need to prepare for a regular interview face to face, which is absolutely true, the video interview brings some other dynamics that maybe sometimes you haven't thought about, especially someone coming out of school. Maybe you're not used to this format of interviewing. So we actually have 3 kind of tips about how you look at it before, during, and after. And I linked it in the chat. There's a kind of a free template that you can get that kind of highlights some of the things that I'm going to share right now. So as you would for any interview, there needs to be, a lot of nice preparation, doing research on the company, having clarity on what your own skills are, what you're going to say, how you're going to answer interview questions. But the piece that now needs some additional attention is the technology. Do you have, a camera that's working on your laptop? Are you looking at the camera versus looking down at yourself on the screen? Making sure that you're still dressed professionally, even though we might be at home, you're still trying to make a positive impression. So having that, appropriate business attire on, at least I usually say put the whole outfit on, because you never know if you have to stand up to go get something or do something, but really be dressed appropriately for the interview. And, be ready to ask questions, but also make sure that your microphone's working, that you have good lighting. I'm actually using like an external light for this video, but if not, face your video in front of a window so you get natural light, because sometimes people look like they're in the dark. So just having that preparation from a technology standpoint, in addition to the research and clarity on how you want to represent yourself, I think is really important from a video interview perspective. During the interview, so, normally we say when you show up for an in-person interview, I always was giving the recommendation to show up, a half an hour ahead of time, or at least 20 minutes ahead, to sit in the lobby or be there. And now with video, sometimes people are running them like one right after the other. You don't want to be too early. You want to be like maybe a minute or two, but not 15 or 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes early, because they might be on with another candidate. So you kind of want to cut it a little bit closer. The other thing with video is sometimes it really dulls down your expressions and how you say things. So you have to bring more energy and really kind of feel like sometimes you're overdoing it. And instead of feeling like if that's not who you are, but even just being able to speak slowly and articulate what you were saying. So in case your microphone was a little muffled, or in case the sound wasn't perfect, but be able to really smile, bring energy, speak slowly. You want to emote that confidence. The other really nice thing about video interviews is that you can have your notes. Now, you don't want to be looking down at your notes the whole time. Now, something that I did even for this video is that I do all these little Post-it notes and I put them around my computer, and it's a great way for anyone interviewing or just reminding yourself of things that you want to mention and having it near you. So you're still looking at the camera, but you're having your information nearby, but you're not necessarily looking down. But we also suggest taking notes. It's really important to capture as much as you can while maintaining eye contact. So whatever shorthand you need, but taking notes, because very often, sometimes we don't always remember what was said, or we want to make sure when we write that thank you note that we can replay some of the things in the conversation. And that brings us to after. When after you have that video interview, is you want to make sure that you are sending an email thank you note within 24 hours of that conversation. I can't tell you how many employers I have spoken with and recruiters who say that the thank you note is such a critical piece, and that when people don't send a thank you note, it really puts a negative tone and their opinion of the person, because the follow-up is really, really important. So you want to send that email, thank you note. I used to say, mail a handwritten note. I'm not saying that you can't, but a lot of people are now working from home and you may not have their home address. That handwritten note may not be seen at the office for some time. So email is totally appropriate as long as you do it within 24 hours. And in terms of follow-up, I get this question a lot of how often should someone follow up every time that after they've had the interview. And our philosophy is, you should be following up every, beyond the 24 hours, every 5 to 7 days. And it should maybe reference something from the conversation, or maybe you found an article that you thought would be of interest. But I think the more that you can show that you're persistent, even if you have to use the phrase, please pardon my persistence, when you are sending the note, you have to, make sure that you're reaching out and you're getting the information as to know where you stand, but also trying to add value. So I'll pause there. Any questions, or if you want to post in the comments about virtual interviews, anything that you're seeing that you have any questions on, because that's something that's really kind of a big topic for us. And then the other thing I wanted to mention about interviewing is the one-way interview. That's another becoming a more popular means for communicating from businesses and potential, prospects and employees. And it's tough. It is really tough, especially for college students, young adults who have not dealt with this before. So there's a few companies that are doing it. It's either HireVue, SparkView, VideoCruiter. And what it is that they send you a list of questions. There's no real person. And you're given either in written form or a short video, and they'll say, okay, you have 30 seconds to read this question or hear this question, and then you have 3 minutes to answer. So it's creating not only a one way, you have no idea how you're doing, but also this stress under a short time limit. And this is something that needs practice. You should never jump onto one of these without having said it out loud, having recorded yourself, practice the whole bunch of different interview questions of, why should we hire you? Tell us why you want to work here. What's interesting to you about this role. But this type of interview, and I know stresses out so many young people because, who wouldn't be? You have no feedback, you have no facial expression to know if you're on the right track, and it's under like a buzzer, under a time limit. So this really needs practice. This also you need to know the technology. You need to really read the instructions carefully on the platform, because if you're not following how they, want you to submit or, start or stop, record, that could really, kind of catch you up. Same thing. You got to bring a lot of energy. You got to speak clearly and slowly. And you need to make sure that when you have your answers, that you give a beginning, a middle, and an end to your answers. You got to close them at the end, where you're just not like hanging out there in the middle of saying, yes, I can do this, but you didn't say how you could potentially do it for them or how you've learned from it. So just to be aware of one-way interviews, do not take them casually, because it is another screening mechanism and something that is becoming, it's a cost savings for company. I don't think it's a great tool, but it's out there, and something that, more and more, there's definitely more screens doing the one-way interviews as a first go round. So if anyone on on our call here has experience with them or wants to share in the comments any questions or what it's felt like, I welcome that feedback. So I'll jump to a question that we have here about what should be in the email that you put in your thank you notes. That's a great question. So when you are sending a thank you to someone after an interview, you want to think of it in a few ways. One, you want to obviously thank them for their time and every person who you met. So don't do it just to one. If there was a 4-person interview and 4 different people, you need to get the emails of all those people. Try to make sure you ask for that before you finish the call. But when you write the email, you first want to thank them for their time, but you also want to remind them of something that they shared with you that you were really excited about. They could have said, our goal is to get to 20% growth this year. So maybe you acknowledge, say, I'm really impressed with your goal of getting to 20% growth. And then you want to show how your skills can help them accomplish that goal. So because of my skills in research, analysis, and being able to communicate with clients, I feel confident that I can contribute to the team in helping you achieve that. As I stated during the interview, I had this kind of experience. Or maybe you're highlighting one or two of your skills and a specific experience that you're reminding them again that you were able to help them be successful. And that you also want to share that you're going to follow up with them next week to touch base again. So you're almost setting the expectation that they would be ready to hear from you again, that you look forward to hearing from them soon. But I think, showing that you listened and showing how you can, again, repeat how you're adding value to them would be really valuable in a thank you note. So I hope that answers your questions. If there's more questions about that, I'm happy to address that. All right. So please feel free to put in your questions or in the Q&A or in the chat. Happy to address them. The other thing I wanted to talk about was this common concern for so many parents and grads is this feeling of, how do I get started? How does my grad get started on this process? They either feel stuck, they don't know what to do, they are floundering, they're not sure, what area to go in, or maybe you studied something in college, but maybe that's not what you're feeling in terms of what you want to aspire to from a job role. So there's whole feeling of, how do I break this inertia of getting going and getting started? And what I suggest is kind of keeping things really simple. A lot of times people jump, well, let me just fix my resume and send that out to hundreds of people. And I'm going to, or let me just apply online, or I'll take any job. And I would really encourage, you or your grad to kind of pause for a moment and not do that, because it very rarely yields good results. What I would suggest is, a young adult coming out of school or going to graduate is, you need to take this self-assessment of getting clarity on your own skills. And I mentioned that earlier of, this whole understanding. Hold on. People said people are placed in a waiting room. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was for this call, but I got the call. All right, I'm gonna get to your question in just a moment. I just wanted to make sure no one was waiting to get in. What do you do to get started? So this idea of understanding your core skills, what are your top 3? What are the skills that you're good at? And as parents, you can help your children to identify this. Sometimes we're like, well, let's just take a look at, what have you done? What has been in your experience? What did you study? It could be a combination of, if you were a camp counselor for 3 years and maybe you demonstrated leadership, maybe you took on a responsibility that you were overseeing all these children, or maybe you stepped up in a group project and you were, showing how you led the group to a better outcome. Or maybe you showed how you were able to analyze data during an internship. You had to summarize, a database and provide those results to an employer. Help them figure out what are these few things, no more than 3. I mean, obviously we all have lots of skills, but getting them to narrow down to 3 skills will start to help solidify, okay, if I'm really great at research, digital marketing, and analysis, well, maybe I want to start thinking about then what are those stories that prove I have those skills? How would I explain that to someone who's never met me and can't see, a portfolio? How would I explain that? So we spend a lot of time on getting clarity on the skills. And once you have some clarity on the skills, you want to do some research of what are the kinds of companies, or more importantly, the people who have a job that would maybe use these skills. And you don't have to know these people. What is the job? Is it a job that I'm creating digital marketing content? Is it a job that I'm doing business analytics? Is it a job where I'm writing copy, or any kind of role? Maybe, just doing some research. What are the kinds of roles that I'd want to look at, and how could I translate or align my skills to that? It doesn't have to be an exact match, but understanding, let's think about what types of roles are good for my skill set. And then also let's take a look at companies. So identify like 10 people, 10 companies. And one of my favorite ways to identify and search for people is through LinkedIn. And actually, maybe I don't know if Rachel, if you're on, maybe we can like link I have a free course, LinkedIn for college students, on the basics of how to use LinkedIn. And if not, I'll put it in the chat. But it's a great way to identify alumni because they tend to be the most friendly. They tend to be the most, oh, I did that too, or I had that major. So look for people who had a similar major as yourself to say, well, what are they doing now? Or maybe it's not matching your major, just other alumni, because they tend to give you a better sense of, well, what are the types of jobs I could go after? And I think just starting off with your skills, 10 people, 10 companies, and then connecting, you just reaching out saying, like you, I'm a fellow alum from XYZ, university, and I'd love to learn more about what you're doing, as opposed to coming off of, I really need a job or I really need an internship. You want to be curious. You want to be learning. You want to be understanding what you can learn from that person. So I think that's one of the important ways on how to connect with people and really start to understand what's out there, because it's not always going to come automatically in the middle of the night, and it's not always going to come just by doing research on the internet. You have to talk to real people doing real jobs to get an understanding of what's out there. Okay, so I'm going to address a question that we have here. So talking about waiting rooms for an appointment. So sometimes students are placed in a waiting room for video interviews when they log in 10 minutes before their appointment. Some have waited as long as 90 minutes after their appointment time, and there's no way to excuse yourself except logging off. Many times they have to log off and go to class. The result is that the employer does not meet with them again. Any ideas on how to deal with this? That's a great question, and I'm not sure of the exact context, but I'm guessing it might be related to career fairs that have been virtual or any kind of virtual recruiting, and I could talk about that as well. And I know for a fact that, let's just talk about the virtual career fairs that took place at a lot of universities, saying yes, it's the virtual career fairs that took place on campus this fall, still happening, but a lot of them have taken place, that there was a lot of technology issues. And that as much as campus career services were trying to provide this whole technology forum and these platforms, whether it was through Handshake or Career Echo, there's different platforms, that there was a huge demand that I don't think they anticipated. I know, I'll speak for myself. My son is a senior in college, and I know a lot of kids at his school had a lot of difficulty getting into the platform. So my feeling is the same way it would be if it was a professional situation. Look, technical glitches happen. We are in the state of technology. We had a client the other day who was online, and literally the power went out on his house and the entire street. So my feeling is that they have to be assertive. They have to reach out. They have to contact career services and say, I'd like to get in touch with the campus recruiter for this person and for this particular job, and identify, I waited for 90 minutes. I had to go to class. I'm very interested in the job. I'd like to speak with you. By the way, you can easily track these people down. If you type in your university name and campus recruiting onto LinkedIn in the search bar, you could probably find who that is as well. Or if it's not the exact person, it's someone who probably works with them. So I would, part of this is up being assertive and being persistent, that you need to reach out. And even if they said, well, we're not giving you the name, Google's a wonderful thing. You could probably figure out who's in charge of campus recruiting for almost any company and reach out to them directly. If not through Google, through LinkedIn, through figuring out what their email address is, there's tools out there to identify that. But I would not let that go. I would also make sure the student calls career services and let them know that this occurred, because it's growing pains for a lot of them, and it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for for anybody to spend an hour and a half waiting for somebody to show up. And everyone's time is valuable, and so just because they're a student doesn't make their time any less valuable. So I would encourage them to be persistent and follow up with them. So I hope that helps to answer the question there. And then my colleague Rachel did also link in the comments the free course that we have, LinkedIn for college students. It's a really great step-by-step. There's a few sections on how to create a great profile, how to connect with fellow alumni on LinkedIn, and then how to also search for jobs inside of LinkedIn and get alerts when things are coming up. Okay, great. I'm glad that worked out, Steve. Thanks for the question. So, what other questions can I answer for you? So, I know I've done a lot of talking, but I really want to make sure that if you have questions that are on your mind, please, put them in the chat, share them. Tell me, how's it going for your, what are you seeing in the market? Whether you're the job seeker yourself or you're a parent, tell me what, you're seeing out there. Do you feel that the market's really difficult? Or if not, and I'd love to know, if also just make sure too, whether it's through the poll, what's happening. Oh, you know what? Maybe I never launched the polling. So my apologies there. I think I forgot to hit the word launch. So you might have just seen I just launched the polling so you could tell me what you're thinking about. But anything else on your mind about what's happening? I'll give you a moment there to fill out the poll and to let us know. I'll tell you a couple other things. I have the opportunity to speak with many hundreds of students and parents. And one of the things that we also hear about from parents especially is, should I make introductions? Should I facilitate introductions for my son or daughter? And the opposite is like, I'd love to help them, but I don't have any introductions in this field. And how much should I be involved is really, I think, a good question. And I'll, again, I'm like a mom of a college senior, so I'm also living this real time. And I think it's a valid question. Look, I'm all about using any resource you can to connect you to a job. I think there is no shame in using family connections, friends, whoever you know. But I'm going to give the caveat. Where I've seen this go wrong, where I've seen it really not go so well, is when parents make an introduction to someone at a very high level when their son or daughter is early in the job search. They're not sure of what they want. They're just testing things out. They haven't practiced talking about themselves. They haven't practiced interviewing, and they'll make an introduction and they'll have a, informal conversation, and it goes nowhere. And the reason why it goes nowhere is because your son or daughter were not prepared enough. They were not prepared enough to have done enough research or share why they want to work for that company. When it comes to hiring in business, even though people are friends, like, this is all about money. And people are very, a little bit more jaded or cautious about just, offering a friend's child a job. So I think I love the idea of, helping them prepare, helping them make sure they know how to talk about themselves, make sure they understand how to talk about their skills and be able to, answer interview questions and practice having these dialogues. I think that's fantastic. But the introductions, I think, should hold off until you know that they're ready. Sometimes I know there's a feeling of, well, let me just do it early because they really need a job. But if they're not prepared, it's not going to go well. And then the opposite of if they say, well, I'd love to help my child, but I don't have any connections. I don't really know anybody in the field. That's okay. You don't have to be responsible for the connections. One of our things that we love to teach is that we teach young people how to make their own network, how to make their own connections. How do you send a cold email or cold request to someone on LinkedIn asking to connect with them and then learn more about their role? I mean, that's part of how they have to learn how to sell themselves and how you not only get your first job, it's how you also learn how to network and get your second and third job into the future. So I think just, always just be, that's something that comes up a lot is, how involved should I be? It's so hard. And I'll speak, as a parent to kind of, you want to help them, but you also want to give them the guidance. And I think there's a balance of both, of helping them prep and helping them get clear on what they have to offer and who they can offer it to. All right. Any other questions? Let me come back to the poll and see if people have filled it in. Okay. So here we go. So we have, so far, 10 people have answered, 50% are parents, 30% are students, and then 20% are just interested in learning more. And the topic that has the most interest at 50% says how to start the job search, which we cover, then how to get an interview, how to compete against other candidates. I can touch on that, and then who's hiring. So I know we covered that. So I'll spend a minute on how to compete. And it is very competitive. It's always been competitive. I think, people say, well, the job search is so difficult now. And I'm going to say, even when there was no pandemic, that it was challenging for a lot of, young adults, recent grads to figure out their path and compete for a job. What makes it more competitive now is that there's even more people trying to go for that kind of position. And when employers are looking for people, I always encourage, everyone to think, well, put yourself in the shoes of an employer, or think of yourself as like the CEO of the company. If you're the employer or you're the CEO, what do you care about? Usually you care about money. It's either about making money or saving money. So the more, and I don't care what the role is. I don't care if it's not, sales or not, or if you're working, just sorting files. Anything that you can demonstrate in your conversation when you speak to an employer about how you can help them to make money or to accomplish their goals, that is what really starts to help individuals stand out. Now, obviously, this assumes that you have an interview or you have some kind of informational interview to have this conversation. And we can get into that as well. But one of the most important things that I see, or challenges that I see, is so many young people will come to an interview or a conversation and they talk a lot about themselves. I did this and I did that and I had this experience. But there always needs to be this point of, asking really good questions of like, tell me about your organization. What is your focus for 2020 or 2021? What are the goals? What are the challenges that you faced? Because when you start to understand that information, you can also then say how you can help them to accomplish them or overcome those challenges. And that's what, in general, I see helps candidates to stand out, is that you're putting yourself in their shoes and talking about how your skills help them. Too often young people will say, well, this job would be great for me. This would be a great learning experience. And I'm sure it would, but they don't really care that it's great for you. I'm not to be so blunt. They want it to be great for them because everyone's taxed, everyone's stressed. So I think just that understanding of how can you help someone else accomplish their goals and an organization, and always be thinking that way when you have an interview, when you have a conversation. I think that's a really critical piece, to not be all about, this is what I want or this is what I want to do in 5 years. It's how I can help you. And that's something that I think has been, important in just kind of seeing that polling. Any other questions about kind of the topics, anything that's on your mind? I'm happy to hang on for a few more minutes if there's something else that you're thinking about. I know my colleague Rachel's on here. If you want to send me a message if you think there's anything else you think I should jump in about. But I definitely feel that there's opportunity. I know that there's a lot of stress. I know there's a lot of concern about, how do we make this happen? But I think people, you need to be patient. You need to be persistent. And I think, I really do believe there's opportunity. If you are interested, we do group coaching, a lot of small group coaching, try to keep about 5 clients in a group. Our clients love it. They feel like they're getting a lot out of it and they're getting hired. Our next group coaching starts on Monday, December 14th. It runs for 6 weeks. Actually, it's a 7-week program. 6 weeks are as a group and the 7th week is private. And we've had, tremendous success in helping students land the job. We're not recruiters. We don't place them in the job, but we're really teaching them the tools on how to be successful in making that happen. So, and I think, so thank you. So Rachel just posted, any questions, feel free to go to our website. If you want to talk to us further, I welcome the opportunity to have a discovery call. Just click on the contact button and be happy to talk with you. So I thank you for all joining in. I hope everyone continues to stay safe, and we will communicate as much as we can about how to help young adults get the job that they deserve. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.